I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
Relationships have serious challenges all the way along. And I think, in my case, if I hadn't been pretty brutally determined to be the kind of man in a relationship, in a marriage that I want to be, I wouldn't have made it. I mean, I wouldn't be here.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing here at Together, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes. It makes a big difference when you do that. And you can also check out our crowdfunding campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. Now on to the show. Today's episode is part one of a two-part interview about a couple that is still flirting with each other after more than 40 years together. And this isn't to say that everything that they have done or that their relationship is perfect in any way. In fact, these two have been through more life, and by that I mean ups and downs, than anyone really has a right to expect. It's more that by choosing to break the mold of certain social conventions, as these two have done, they were able to craft a relationship that they actually wanted to be in. And whether they were entirely aware of what they were doing at the time or not, what they created is still working today. Part one of this interview is really about breaking the social mold and how to build a life together afterwards. Part two, which we'll release on Thursday, is an exploration of the question, what is infidelity anyway? And what are the ins and outs of a sexual power dynamic? Now, this interview is one of my personal favorites, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did recording it. So with that, let's go to Katie Nelson and Doug Winter. You know, the reason that you two are on the show is because...
That was, of course, going to be my first question.
Haley.
Is that how
Haley
it
and
goes?
Jenny
Okay.
recommended you. Now, we've already interviewed Haley Winter and Jenny Sauerklein, and you two are Jenny's parents-in-law now.
Correct.
And Haley's parents.
Correct.
And they both said that you would be a magnificent interview. And I remember having met you at the wedding and loved both of you. And so... that's why I invited you to come on the show. But I don't know anything about you other than that, except you sent me a bio, which, by the way, is very impressive.
Okay.
Did I ignore you?
You did ignore me.
I see.
But I think that's your thing, right? That's your shtick, and it works pretty well.
Well, it's interesting. I do a little bit of that as a contractor. I say, I don't care what you think of me. If you want me, you're going to get me, and you get me 110%. But I'm not going to go out of my way to prove anything. It's like that, yeah.
I hope that's the same here today.
Yeah, good.
But tell me about how you met in the early days so that we have some background.
Well, there's always two versions, there's always two versions of that. You want to run it and then I can straighten you out?
Okay, sure. Let's do that. Okay. So we first met at Oberlin College, which is where we both went to school. Although by the time I went, Doug was out. I attended Oberlin. Doug had already graduated. He was teaching one course there and working in town. We were both connected to this thing called Oberlin Dance Collective, which was a group of people working at Oberlin College making dances and dancing. And that group, at some point when I was in the middle of going to college, left and moved to San Francisco. And no longer was associated with the college. And at that time, I didn't finish school, and I went to San Francisco. Doug went to San Francisco. The rest of the collective went to San Francisco.
What year was this?
1976.
Oh, okay. All right. So what a risky move, though. So you were in college.
I was in college, yeah.
Oh, you had to. We didn't give a shit.
Really?
It was not. It didn't feel risky. We didn't care.
Yeah.
In fact, that still kind of operates a lot.
Was that the era, or was that just who you are?
That's a really good question. I think a combination of both.
Yeah.
I was going to say both.
Yeah, it was definitely the era. I mean, there was all the stuff that goes along with the 70s, 60s and 70s.
Yeah. So all of you just uprooted, left the Midwest, totally different school, different environment, and came to San Francisco.
This is true. We don't need to refine this too much, but you went out separately, right? You weren't part of the school bus and all that stuff?
No, because you see, when I grew up in Los Angeles, and I decided not to go to college right away, and I decided to go to San Francisco and dance. So I'd already been dancing in San Francisco, at which point I met one of the collective members, the dance people, Kimi Okada in San Francisco, actually in an Aikido class. And I said, I'm not sure I want to go to the college I was supposed to go to, which was Sarah Lawrence. And she said, well, check out Oberlin. So I did. And that's when I went to Oberlin. And so when they said they were going to San Francisco, I'm thinking, no problem. I've been there. I've already been dancing there.
That's an easy
that works for
transition.
me. That was not a big deal for me.
I was an Ohio boy. I was born in Toledo. I kind of never left. So for me, I was running away from home to get to Oberlin. I was running away from home to get to California. Didn't feel dangerous. It felt like escape.
An adventure.
This is why it's a complicated question with a not uncommon, I think, and not simple answer.
Yeah. But then you were both out here.
True.
And what was drawing you together?
Well,
I think sex, wasn't it?
That always does that, doesn't it?
I think, you're asking the early question, basically. You're athletic, and the same things that kind of keep us together got us together. Well,
I would say proximity. That's what I was going to say, But it might not have happened if we hadn't lived next door to each other.
I feel like you're flirting with her right now.
I think he is.
This is an ongoing thing, and if it's not, there's probably a problem, right?
How long have you been married?
Shit, I don't know.
We've been
40.
It's close to 40 years.
It's a long time.
We got married in 1983, so.
Oh yes, that's right.
So we didn't get married right away.
You seem like you're still surprised by him.
Well, I had a good family friend of ours say to me, what happens if he gets into something you really don't like?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time.
Why, is that because he pushes limits that this
he
friend would
does,
ask
and
that?
he gets into weird things.
Yeah,
and I said, well, Doug usually finds some way of explaining it to me that makes it interesting to me.
Right.
Well,
the first one was baseball. Like, why do you like this? And he explained all the reasons, the being completely prepared and still, and then completely in action.
Yeah.
And full commitment. And that sounds interesting. And that was the beginning of, a long period of our lives involved in baseball, and Haley ended up playing in the minor leagues.
Right, yeah.
And I think respect for intelligence operated high. It wasn't just sex. But it was also deep respect for intelligence, for applied intelligence that I think we shared, and coupling that with kind of nothing off the agenda. Like anything can be spoken. Not that it's easy, but we respect that. We're interested, maybe not completely aligned, but
are you saying that you share what you're thinking about with your partner, or are you saying something else, which is if something risky comes up, I will share it with my partner?
We do have that agreement. It isn't so easy as that, just, here's a hard thing. I'll just sort of spit it out. But in time, there's no way to not. There's no way to not.
There's no way to not bring it up.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's easy.
Partly because we really live aggressively what we think.
Yeah.
So we're kind of way out over the edge a little bit in a lot of ways. It's the sawdust toilet and the stormwater mess and the gray water thing and the bees and the mushrooms. And, everything's kind of pushed a little bit. And it's hard to hide when you're living that way.
Yeah.
So. Happily, the important stuff has been pretty well shared values, which mainly child rearing and.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that I think we have a certain amount of independent thinking, both of us.
From one another or from society?
From society. And even within that, we think differently. But for the most part, we have shared values. I remember thinking...
What does that mean?
Well, I think we really found out it when we raised our son.
Yeah.
Like, both of us didn't worry whether he had clothes on. Some people, that would really bother some people. I didn't care about his physical safety the way some moms would. I figured he'd learn how to deal with it. Like a lot of people are very terrified when a kid falls, or neither of us had that problem.
Yeah.
We gave him a lot of physical freedom, and he got some bumps and scrapes. But it gave him a real sense of being okay in the world. I remember when he was little, we just let him crawl around on the dinner table and sit on it while he ate. We didn't worry about him being properly seated at the table.
Right.
So there were things like that we definitely had shared values.
Right.
And it came out most clearly, I think, when we parented, because in a way you have to go back to each other, back and forth, like, oh, this mother thinks this, what do you think? Or this school thinks this, what do you think? And
you found that you were often arriving at the same conclusion, which reduced potential conflict.
Exactly, where I think a lot of people fall apart there, actually.
Well, not just conflict. It also was an implicit support structure. We're both pretty laissez-faire. This is not so easy to do if you haven't got anybody who agrees with you.
Yes.
So it was freedom of conflict, but it was also support.
Oh, yeah, it goes both ways. That's an excellent point. In order to thrive, you need to have that.
And I would say that this goes as a metaphor or a larger issue. I think we were, even then, it wasn't explicit about story, but we were not willing to suck up the story. In other words, this is the way kids should behave, this is the way a house should look, this is the way you should eat, all that stuff is a story. And it was a very, this is how you used to sleep. The family bed thing was a, we did it.
Yeah.
It was, and we did it for a long time. Well, this is not trivial in the larger world. And I think the fact that we were easy to reject the usual story or our childhood training story or any of that stuff has helped us now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was easy, but we were willing to, and that's the support structure we gave each other.
Right.
We agreed that we would like to try something different.
Yeah, and by story in the specific context, you mean what the broader society was saying is the right way to do...
The right way, the legal way, the sound way, the economic viable way. I don't care. It's all just an idea and a story.
Well,
and if it doesn't match what I'm up to.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, go ahead.
I feel like there was one point where this is not quite so radical. I remember we were looking for an elementary school for Haley, and at some point we were looking at the Waldorf school. We looked at a place called Park Day. We looked at a few more. And at some point Doug said, we keep looking for the school that's exactly like us. Why should we do that? We should find a school that's not us but is aligned with us. So it expands his world.
Right.
Because he's already got us. We're a strong influence in his life. But as long as it's not in contradiction with us. And I thought that was very right on. Because, I was trying to find the art place.
Yeah.
And we went to a place that was aligned with us, but not us.
Right.
That was different. And I feel like that's not radical, but that was like looking fully at what would be best for our son, not what we wanted.
I love that. But were you two both able to look outside the traditional narrative independent of one another, or is it something that developed through the relationship?
I don't know about through the relationship, but it definitely developed. I mean, you were just, I don't care. You were maniacal about the thing you were doing. Well,
You
whatever.
mean back in the early days?
Yeah, and actually not in the late days too. It's this sort of driven thing. She's the competitive one. She's the one that's aggressive and out there. And I was a dancer originally, but I didn't have anything resembling the required discipline or the work ethic or any of that stuff to make it happen.
Right.
Where you do. And so
Thinking outside the box.
or ignoring the box. Just
I think parenting made us articulate our values structure or our values. And I think anything that came along that was difficult would also do that. But the first big net between the two of us, I think, was parenting. Other than that, I think we enjoyed each other's bodies and being out in the world. I do know that we got married because I was pregnant, and the day we were supposed to get married, I miscarried.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'd turn to Doug and say, well, should we go through with this? Like, we were getting married because we were pregnant.
Speaking of a story.
Yeah.
And he goes, sure, why not?
Sure.
We were pretty tired.
We had been up all night.
Pretty tired.
But and so we went to see all our marriage was a party in the park. But anyway, I mean, it's not like we had people coming to a service.
Right.
So but I do remember thinking after we got married, I thought, oh, I didn't think this meant anything.
The marriage.
I just thought you do this because it supports your kid. And I felt like, oh no, come on, give me your hand. I felt like, oh, I'm in the world holding on to somebody else after we got married. It had a really strong physical sense of not being alone.
Did that affect you as well, Doug?
I'm not sure how to answer that. Because I came to all this stuff with a whole different old history. And I think at that point I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe in marriage. I didn't believe in the institution. I didn't believe in the contract. I didn't believe in property. I didn't believe in it. But I was also not willing to jettison commitment. Okay? So I would say for me it was a weakening of my sort of maniacal discipline around this anti-story thing and a willingness to relax a little bit.
And allow that story.
And participate. Yeah. It got way more complicated because I also have I think part of the reason we're still together after all this hard stuff, and we've had a fair amount of hard stuff. I mean, I think people who are active and interested and, participants have hard stuff. But part of the reason I'm still here is because I was determined to not reiterate or reproduce what my parents had manifested. And so just
in their marriage.
Yeah.
Because they also manifested you.
Yeah, that's sort of the big chemical wheel does go on. I mean, I don't think that counts. I think I showed up as an accident of the chemical thing, the sexual thing. And also relationships have serious challenges all the way along. And I think in my case, if I hadn't been pretty brutally determined to be the kind of man in a relationship, in a marriage that I want to be, I wouldn't have made it. I mean, I wouldn't be here. That's what I think. Mm-hmm. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a negative thing. I mean, it's a rejection of a model that I was given. My father, the absenteeism and the alcohol and all this stuff that meant that for me he was not there. Well, that's part of my rabid parenting is I'm going to be something else in the world. I'm not going to be that.
You were creating a new story proactively.
Yes.
As a result of rejection of the old.
I'm glad I didn't put it in those terms because I would have had a lot of trouble with it. But that's exactly right. Yes.
I think Doug really believes in being present. So his dad definitely was not present, both emotionally and physically. So I think one of Doug's great desire, first of all, he's the one that wanted to have children, and he wanted to be present. He wanted to counter whatever that abandonment was.
A lot of people understand this. Simple physical presence. Be here.
Yeah.
Put your butt in the saddle. 90%.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that determination carried me through a lot of funk.
When you might have otherwise...
Would have. No, might have. I would have. I had the same kind of ego stuff. I have rights. I should be happy. All this bullshit, Well, really, I should be fully engaged in the world. I should have all this pleasure, blah, blah, blah. And when you're not perfectly aligned with me, if I buy into that crap, then I'm going to find it somewhere else. Well, this is a formula for chaos and ruin.
Yeah.
So it is an antidote for some pretty poisonous stuff that I think my culture encourages.
Yeah, and you're not buying into it is pretty radical. Katie, did that always make intuitive sense to you?
I think, first of all, what kept Doug in the relationship is not the same thing that kept me in the relationship.
Yeah.
And what kept me in the relationship is that physically he felt really good to me. I don't know how else to say it. But it's interesting, presence was his main issue in some fundamental way.
And his goal was to just show up and be there physically.
Yes, yeah.
And so he
did that.
Well, this don't minimize the reality. That was not the goal. That was a requirement.
That was like a
The
minimum.
goal was a little more elegant and a little more nuanced and stuff, but it was a requirement. I would suffer anything rather than leave. So like that kind of feeling.
Wow, yeah.
So, you can abuse me, and I'm, oh well, I'll find a way to make it work and all that stuff. In my better moments. Well, I handed out my share.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think his physical presence is what has been lasting for me.
Yeah.
And she's talking about smelling right and the
It
the
just
warmth.
feels good. I think the fact that I see our marriage as holding hands, and it's like.
Yeah, you still want to hold his hand. You're doing it all
I
through the
like
show.
his body feels right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that. I mean, I think if his brain was crazy or
Crazier.
or very difficult, that might not last. I think there's also something that happens mentally between the two of us. But I'm just saying that that's the thing that kept me in the game.
Through all the challenges.
Yes, which is different than what kept Doug in there.
Yeah.
And his desire to be present with Haley allowed me to do my work.
Right.
So that's the other big.
And your driven thing about the work allowed me to raise my kid the way I want to. Was
Yes.
I was great. Oh. Yes.
Wanna
No
say that
reclining in front of the microphone. Well, you're a drivenness to follow this dance thing allowed me to raise my kid the way I want to without any kind of interference whatsoever. There were months at a stretch you'd be gone. It was at certain periods, and it was spectacular. It was also useful for us. Ships passing in the night, and it was always good to see you because you've been gone a while, blah, 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 all that stuff.
So I want to talk about some of the ups and downs, but as a foundation to that, I'm really curious how both of you, but Doug specifically, since you brought it up, are able to distance yourself from what you think of as your egoic or kind of base needs in order to be more, I guess the ultimate conclusion is that you're more present that way.
Well, sure. I think I'm not sure I'd put it. I think Buddhism's helpful. I think meditation is helpful. I think looking around and seeing how compelled people are by their very narrow egos is helpful. Just objective judgment of the world and the way I see it behaving. But I also think it is kind of the root of all evil, and if you can abstract your life a little bit and have a look at it, it's very helpful.
And it specifically is?
I believe I'm talking about my ego.
Yeah.
I think I'm talking about my ego. And while I apparently can't flat out deny it, I can rein it in, and I can be non-reactive or slow to react, which gives me a minute or two to reflect on what's being triggered, what part of my greed and, avarice and desire for power and fear and all the stuff that's the ego thing. All those devices give me a little bit of help in not allowing it to take over quite so much.
And when did you first start having some facility with that?
Well, I think it's part of a liberal arts education if you're paying attention. I mean, I think from high school. I think so. I've been able to call it by what I think of as its right name better in the last 10 years. But a lot of that's the psychedelic community, and not the people and their behavior, but the literature that goes on around it, and the ideas that are promulgated were helpful in reinforcing and allowed me to say, yes, there's something else possible than this autopilot thing I feel going on around me, and I feel welling up as a result of my upbringing.
And was this state of being obvious to you, Katie, all along during the relationship?
Well, I think one of the reasons, I wouldn't have said that I experienced it in this, when he talks about ego right now. Again, I think we didn't have that kind of conversation until about 10 years ago. Before then, we would have analysis. We would talk about things that are going on. And I think both of us have different kinds of analysis, but we have far-reaching ways of looking at things. And so we would have those kinds of conversations. I do want to say also, early on, I was studying Aikido, but then he started Aikido, which is the sword fighting.
Yes.
And there's a part of all of the Asian martial art forms that it is about staying calm and somewhat detached and being present. So I think early on there was some physical training like that. At some point, Doug did capoeira. And I started doing yoga about 15 years ago, and I know at some point you did yoga for a while. So I think all of those things are suggesting a different physical way of being. And then, of course, there's a different mental way of being in those physical activities. So I think, and I think I've been meditating now for 3 years, pretty regularly. And it does make a difference in that reactive thing and how you see the world. It is weird, but you really start seeing people play the roles and get caught up into the game in a way that I think I did not see 5 years ago.
But now I want to know about what conflict has looked like and does look like for the two of you, since it's inevitable for people.
And I remember when I was 29, he said, and he was 35, he said something like, "So how about retirement?" I'm thinking, I don't care about retirement. And I think I now know that in our relationship, he's always going to meet some thresholds in life sooner than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to just say, okay, I'm going to get on the bandwagon even though it doesn't mean anything to me.
Uh-huh.
On the other hand,
knowing that it will be coming for you eventually.
exactly, and just trusting it matters to him.
Right.
I do want to say that when I turned, I think like 43 or something, I noticed I didn't get whistled at anymore. And I had a day of like, okay, I'm not sexually attractive anymore. And then I thought, oh, wow, I'm totally free. After, I was like, I can do whatever I want. It doesn't matter what people think.
So wait, at first you felt bad about it?
Yes, and within 24 hours I was fine.
And then you felt relieved.
Yes. And then Doug at 60, this is many years later, says, they don't look at me anymore. And I said, oh, just you wait. So that happened to me before it happened to him.
Yeah. So, okay, for the first time.
So I'm just saying that there are these things in our lives, and I think we're looking at what it means to get old, that we're not on the same trajectory as men and women and whatever our age is, whatever I think our traditions are. And I think you just have to have patience or kind of hold it in an open way and see where it goes and not try to understand it.
That's not a particularly interesting one to me.
Which one?
The whistling ad or the sexuality thing or whatever, because the package is not chemical and hormonal in our culture purely. It's bound up with power and money.
Yes.
And therefore men are capable of or are urged to participate in a kind of competitive way beyond I think what would be organically operable. Mm-hmm. Staying young means staying sexually active in a way that the mechanics allow it, and money is the driver. Where women, it's still hormonal and childbearing, and that whole thing is the commodity thing operates in the reverse.
Yes.
So pisses me off. It's this is not an interesting one for us in particular.
I'm just saying that we go through personally different things at different times, and not necessarily at the same time.
See how the dementia thing goes, because that'll be more interesting.
Well, I'm curious about what just happened. What the interplay that just occurred between the two of you. What did that feel like?
Well, basically we disagreed.
Yeah.
He thought that wasn't interesting. I thought it was totally interesting.
Yeah.
Because
and he criticized you, kind of. He said a thing that you just are interested in isn't interesting to him.
He's right. I implied this is not interesting.
Yeah.
It's further complicated by the photographic thing. And my perception of the dance community and the way it presents itself sexually, let's say, right? And my judgment for that, and my associations with my own participation and all that. All this is muddies my response.
Okay, but for me, to me, in some ways, I don't relate to this at all about dance, or I just honestly felt like, oh, I don't have to pay attention to that. Like a certain percentage of my time was I had to respond to what people said, or ignore it, and I wasn't going to have to do it. I got free time, literally less attention to that issue, what I looked like or what I might be.
Well, so you guys, so I was asking a meta question. You two went back into the content, which you disagree on, and it's interesting to me that you disagree. But my meta question is, so he criticized you about something you just said on a podcast, and everybody's going to hear that he criticized you, and you're not fazed.
Nah.
You're not fazed.
Yeah.
What gives?
This is the deal. You can. I think this is true. You can say what you think. We did this with Haley, child rearing. There was very little we weren't completely, maybe abusively open about. Talking about stuff that I think most parents would say, he's too young, he isn't ready, this'll make him upset, all that shit, I don't buy it. I think knowledge is power. I think exposure is power. I think that's a way you share. I think this is the way you do it.
I also think if you actually love your kid knows, and you're not going to disappear, and your love is not going to disappear if we disagree.
Right.
So,
Well, you guys have raised a hell of a kid, so the proof is in.
well, we
that.
were also very lucky. I mean, I like to wallow in that. But the fact of the matter is, we were handed a package that was pretty fine.
Yeah.
I think
We didn't ruin him.
we stayed out of the way. Yeah. It's easy to do. I'll tell you.
All right. Well, okay. So now we've got an example that Katie wanted to talk about that Doug you don't think is particularly interesting. So what's one that you do think is interesting?
Well, I this is probably unfair. I shouldn't have rejected it quite so out of hand. In reality, it's not that it's uninteresting. I do the same thing, expert witness-wise. The stenography typing away, and I'll be wandering off in the room, and she can't understand my words. Sorry.
You get paid by the hour when you do that, so it makes sense.
Being a sexual commodity, or being a sexual object, or having sexual power has probably been the only real thorn historically between us. You know, where we've had real trouble, it's been where we've acted out.
Yes.
And in the sexual realm.
Yes.
Otherwise, I think we're very lucky to respect the intellect. We share that.
Mm-hmm.
We're lucky to respect aesthetics and an aesthetic life. That's helped us a lot, I think, and still does. But there were periods when I think ego created a need for, or the feeling of the right to be happy, to be satisfied. I think it's serious bullshit, but that's what I think was going on, at least for me. So I acted out in a couple of less egregious and maybe some more egregious ways with women, right? And I could justify it by her being gone or her being preoccupied with the art and, all this stuff. But the reality was that I felt I, in some way, deserved something and I was going to get it. Well, I'm here to report that I really judge that harshly. I think it's a big-time bad thing. And I see it operate in all kinds of regards, not just the sexual realm, but all kinds of regards in the culture that I currently live in.
Yeah.
I think it's a poison.
Well, that's it for part one of the Katie and Doug episode, folks. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in Thursday, in which Katie and Doug share the story about their times apart and in which they explore the meaning of monogamy and infidelity in a relationship. You can find out more about Katie Nelson at the ODC Dance Company website. That's odcdance.org. Katie's the co-artistic director at ODC, and she's led quite an impressive career there. I'll put that link in the show notes. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review on iTunes. It makes a big difference when you do that. You can also find our crowdfunding campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out via one of our social platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both at together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director, and my one and only, is Aubrey Pick. She's at the beach right now, and I'm heading out to join her as soon as I get this recording done. Thanks once again to my guests, Katie and Doug. You guys were a revelation. I really enjoyed the show, and I can't wait to see you both again. Be sure to tune in for Thursday's episode, in which you'll hear...
We took time just to see how this will play itself out. Is this something you really want, or is this something that you need to just get out of your system?
That's all for today, folks. See you next time.